Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. Okay, would you mind introducing yourself for the audience, please?
Yes, my name is Sharon Schock, and I'm an artist based in Santa Barbara, California. I work mostly in oil and some gouache, and I preferably like to do like an alla prima style where I finish one piece in one sitting. That's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like to jump off with immediately is that you do plein air painting as well. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, plein air painting is something that I love doing. It's not something that I get to do a lot of at the moment. It's usually, I usually get to do it when my kids are in school. And now we have the new baby, so he's with me all day.
Yeah.
But preferably painting and plein air is something that I would do at least once a week.
Well, since you've mentioned it, we'll come back to plein air. How is the experience of being an artist and a mother? What's your experience of that? How do you manage it?
So my experience is that we all have the same amount of hours in a day. And when you're a mother, you learn how to use those hours and be very efficient about it. So like I look back at before I had kids, and I had all day to just like to paint, to be an artist, and I got very little done. And now that I have like an hour after bedtime, I'm like so productive. Like I am on top of things. It just makes you more efficient. And if you really want to be an artist and you want to be painting, like you're going to make time for that. You'll sacrifice sleep and maybe a little bit of your sanity, but there can be time for both.
So did you say it's an hour before bed is when you at the moment have been painting?
Yeah. Our 10-month-old has not been a great sleeper at all. So I'm up multiple times in the night still with him. I mean, he's a baby, it's normal. But yeah, I'm up through the night, but I usually can get like an hour and a half after he goes to sleep for the night before so that I can have that time to paint. And that is actually, I mean, even before he was born and I had the other kids and I was painting while they were in school, there's something really peaceful about painting after everyone else is asleep. I feel like that's when I do my best work, when the house is quiet, everything is done. No one is like, mom, mom, mom. No one's talking to me. Like I'm alone. Everyone else is asleep and I can just focus and paint.
That's amazing.
Obviously, it's obviously not a great time for like plein air painting because it's dark.
Yeah.
So, but I have done nocturnes before where I go out at night, with my easel and an itty bitty book light and paint plein air nocturnes. Confuses everyone that I meet while I'm doing that.
I bet it does. Well, what's your background as well? Because I'm not fully aware of, did you go to art school or what was your route through to this point?
So I went to Westmont College, which is a liberal arts school in Santa Barbara, here in Santa Barbara. And I was a fine art major. It's not a specific art school. It's a liberal arts college. So you have a bunch of, general education courses, and then you have a major that you focus on. I was probably not the best art major that there was because, I was also taking other courses. So what is more difficult for me, like painting or this other course that required me to do math? So like all these other courses would take like more effort, so I would focus more on them. So if I could go back, I wish that I would have spent more time just like focused on like exploring my style, just like spending more time painting, that even if it wasn't for like a specific class, like I feel like I could have done better in that area. But yeah, I was fine art major. And then afterwards, I got a very, very boring job at a library. And I think that was key to like push me to like be a better artist, because my day job was so boring. So there was no creative outlet in there at all. So after work, I would just like could not wait to start painting. So I felt like that really like helped push me to find my style in that way.
So that was, how long ago was that? Were you a librarian?
I was a librarian right after college for about, how long? 3 years. And then I got married during that time also. So I was working at the library, I would come home, and then in the evenings I would paint. And I was, I was developing my own style or whatever, and I was, exploring what types of things I would want to paint. It was around that time that I discovered the Daily Painters movement, which really, really spoke to me and helped me like progress. It was way back in the era of like Blogger. Everyone had artist blogs. There was no Instagram yet. So I would come home and I would do my little painting. It helped me because the Daily Painter movement was like, everything is, you paint one small painting a day, and it was small. And so then it was the practice of starting and finishing a painting, starting and finishing over and over and over. Whereas before I was working on these really large canvases and like spending weeks on a painting and then being like, well, now I'm stuck with this large canvas. Like, what am I even going to do with this? And just like the practice of daily painting, where I would just like finish lots. I learned so much more during that practice. So I would do that in the evenings. And then my husband he got transferred, and his job got transferred to out of state. So at that point, I had been selling my works a little bit on Etsy. So at that time, I just thought, well, I'm moving anyway. I have to find a new job. So what if I didn't find a new job? And what if I just actually tried to see if this worked? And that is what I've been doing ever since.
So, I mean, I'm going to have to ask you then, how do you do that? Because there are so many different ways of doing it. What was your experience, your moving location of where you live? How do you actually then establish yourself as an artist from that point?
That is a good question. I feel like I got in kind of early with like the whole daily painter movement, like with the whole blog followers and like building up an email newsletter list. We moved to a small town. It's Carpinteria, California. It's really little. And I met another artist there, and they would have like a First Friday type of thing, like where you go around, you see all the artists around town. And she let me set up outside of her shop for First Fridays. So I would take my paintings there on First Fridays, and I would do so well. Like, people would buy so many of them. I was like shocked. And then I was also selling online through Etsy at that time, and things were also selling pretty well. I mean, Etsy is really different now. Now I don't sell on Etsy anymore. But at the time it was like for handmade things. It was back in 2009, so it was different. So I felt like making local connections, it being a small town, so like my name kind of like spread a little bit faster than it would like in a larger town. And also that coupled with like being available on the internet for like a larger audience, helped like propel my career forward. And I did all the things you were supposed to do, like join the local art associations. There was 3 of them that I joined, and then doing local group shows, both ones that were juried and not juried. And then from doing those group shows, I would get like a lot of galleries that would approach me then afterwards. They saw my work in the show and they're like, hey, would you like to do a solo show or a show with you and one other artist? And that's how I would get my like gallery shows.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you were already quite prolific though as a painter, because if you were selling a lot of your work, you must have had a lot of paintings available to people already.
I was doing at least one every day. And now I'm like, man, I was only doing one a day, because if I had all day now, my gosh. If I could go back in time. Anyway,
Well, it seems like there's a bit of
I was doing at least one a day.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I didn't realize. I think we've got a bit of a delay between us. Sorry. What were you saying? You're doing at least one a day.
Yeah, sorry. I was doing at least one a day, so I did have like a good amount of paintings to sell. I probably was not selling one a day. So I would have like, I had enough to like show. And like I remember having to, when I was preparing for a show in the galleries, that I would have to like keep ones back because that's how fast they were selling. Maybe I wasn't charging enough, but I remember having to be like, okay, this one is for the show. I will not show it to anyone. I will set it over here. These ones are for, and just like stockpiling so that I would have them to show when the time came. I don't know. A lot of it is luck also, because the Santa Barbara News Press came out and did like a 4-page full color like story on me.
Wow.
For I don't know why. Just like, how did I lucky? It was just luck. And then like people still talk to me about that. And I'm like, who's reading the paper? But apparently people, and they still recognize me from that. A lot of it is luck.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you definitely put some work in. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I am curious though, when you're painting at least one a day, what is it that you've learnt, or what is it that you can share about what you've learnt about composition?
What did I learn about composition?
Yeah, with your experience, like
Sorry,
what
the delays.
Yeah, I can feel the delay. It's an awkward pause after I ask you a question. Yeah, it's if you must naturally have this sense of composition now. Do you have anything that you stick to as far as, is it rule of thirds? Is it a kind of a specific light dark contrast that you try to create a balance with, or how is it you approach composition?
Yeah, a lot of different ways. I feel like now I'm much more like cognizant of it, whereas when I was like painting years ago, I wasn't paying as much attention to composition as I should have. Um, but yeah, it depends on what format that I'm painting on. So like if I'm painting on a square, obviously the format is going to be much different than if I'm painting landscape or vertical. So I kind of just, so I paint mostly at night, so mostly from photos that I take during the day. So let's say I'll go out to, the beach during like golden hour. I'll just take a bunch of photos. And then I'll come home and I'll be like, and I'll look at all of them, decide which ones are like, this is what I want to this, or like combine a couple, be like, I like this part of this one and this part of this one, and then trying to decide which format would best suit the composition that I want it to be. Whether it's like I want to emphasize like the height of this tree that I'm going to paint something vertically, or I'm like, I just like this one part, and then maybe I'll put that in the middle of a square format. I'm sure that everyone is aware of that. What is the book? The Art of Composition, the very technical one by Payne. I think it's around here somewhere. Obviously that it's super helpful. I don't even think that I finished the whole thing, just because there's so much information, and it's a very dense read, but so helpful when thinking about composition. And I feel like composition is still something that I struggle with a lot, which is why I'm not a big still life painter. Like I have done like still lifes in the past, but I would much rather like go out and find compositions in landscape than trying to like create a composition in a still life like on my own.
Well, was there a point when when you were starting out, did you try portraiture and you just preferred the landscape, or were you just drawn to the landscape, being that it's such a, because I've traveled the States, so I know how beautiful the landscape is. How did that occur?
Yeah, I think I've always been kind of drawn to landscape more than portraiture, more than still life. I've dabbled in still life. I have not done a lot of portraiture at all. I mean, I'll occasionally put some figures into my landscapes, or like painting my kids get painted a lot, but never like, not like a portrait of them. Like I don't try to do their face, but I just like have them in the landscape a little bit. I feel like it's a mixture of being really interested in painting portraits, and also it's harder to sell. Like I'm not gonna, if I like paint a portrait of some random person, like no one's gonna buy that. That's not something that is really sellable. And it's that I'm not really interested in. And also I wouldn't want to be doing commissions painting like portraits of people. It's too precise, I think. Yeah. And with landscape, I can kind of just like be more expressive. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was actually going to ask you as well, because there's a mixture of precision and expressionistic brushstrokes, which I think are really nice, because you can almost see there's certain paintings that I've seen that you've done where if you were to just section off part of the lower section, it would be abstraction, because you can see that you've gone nice and loose, but it's beautifully kind of calligraphic. I don't know if that's a word, kind of, because it has this rhythm to it that's kind of poetic. It's beautiful. So that's something which I feel is well crafted and well earned. Is that something which you mentioned earlier about learning your style? Is that a comfort that you've earned, or is that something you've always tried to do?
Yeah, so my early works are very different than my works right now. They have become looser and more painterly, which I wanted that to happen. Before, they were very precise. I would get out itty bitty brushes, and they were very realistic looking. And so for me now, I feel like they're not as realistic. But then people will come into the studio and be like, wow, I thought it was a photograph, which is like the worst the worst, nicest thing they could say.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, thank you, because they're trying to be nice, but I'm also like, man, I'm not doing a very good job because I didn't want it to look like a photo. What can you do?
Well, for anyone out there who doesn't understand, why is it that you want it to be looser? I understand this, but for anyone out there who's not sure why you'd want that, why is it you'd want your paintings to be looser and not quite so photorealistic? Not photorealistic, more, more painterly and instead of less so.
Yeah. Well, just that I want it to be painterly. Like I want it to look like a painting. I want it to look like a human made this, not like a camera made this. Because anyone can take a photo, really. I mean, some people can take photos better, not saying anything against photographers, because I'm also not the greatest photographer. But yeah, I like the part that gets me excited when I see other people's works is like the use, like a different use of color and like, brush strokes that are interesting and drawn to pieces that are like very, very detailed, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, because you mentioned your color palette, I don't know if you know, but this is something we like to ask artists. If you're willing to disclose, what is your color palette?
Oh boy. So I do not work with a limited palette. I started actually oil painting when I was 6, and then consistently until college used oil paints. And then in college I wasn't allowed to oil paint because of safety. So I had to switch to acrylics, which I hate. But for like my entire life until after I graduated college, I did work with a limited palette. I worked with cadmium red, cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue, and white. And those were my only colors. And now it's much different. So I kind of switch things up a little bit depending on what painting I'm doing, what the subject matter is, and whether I feel like I'm stuck in a rut, because I feel like when I use the same colors over and over again, I get into like patterns of what I'm mixing. So if I feel like I'm using something too much, like recently it was sap green. I was using it far too often. And so I took it away. I'm not allowed to use it anymore until I get out of the habit. And then, I had to relearn how to mix greens with other pieces. And I would always mix sap green with other colors, obviously, but it was just like a system. I would like, okay, little sap and a little ultramarine blue. And so I feel like switching out your colors also like aids in the creativity. This isn't answering your question. I'm sorry. You can cut all that if you want.
Really interesting. No, I like it. Great.
Because I just don't know them off the top of my head. Right now I'm using alizarin, crimson, permanent. And then I'll use like a naphthol red. I try to steer clear of cadmiums because of the safety issues. Been pregnant a lot. So just trying to keep cadmiums out. And there are alternatives that work just as well for me. So Hansa yellow deep, Hansa yellow medium, ultramarine blue is my workhorse color. Like obviously sap green is good.
Still allowed again. You don't need to use that again.
It's still allowed. I let it back in recently. Yellow ochre. I sometimes use a transparent red oxide, which is kind of like I like it better than a burnt sienna or a burnt umber because it's more transparent. Cerulean blue. I might be saying that wrong.
Yeah, well, it's very close to how everyone else says it. So yeah,
I'm realizing I don't say these often out loud. And then just titanium white. I think those are my most used colors. I mean, again, here and there will be like I'll add in a different one, like phthalo turquoise if I'm painting like a lot of water, or cobalt teal, which I try to stay away from cobalts, but cobalt teal is just like, it's a really pretty color.
Yeah. So, I mean, has that just been expanding and expanding your palette, or is it something which all of a sudden just exploded? What happened?
Um, so when I started painting full time, my palette like did explode. Like I had so many, I would go and I would find, all the artists whose work I enjoyed. Well, what's their palette? Well, what's their palette? Well, and oh, they use this. Well, maybe I should use that. And I would just like bought so many colors.
Yeah.
And I feel like now I'm just like, yeah, that's too many. That's too many colors. um, and I think I was searching for like the magic color. Well, they use this, and maybe my paintings will be better if I use whatever color, magenta, whatever. And there's no magic color.
No.
But there is colors that work better. So I do try to have a warm version of the color and a cool version of every primary color on my palette. Or when so if I'm mixing something that's in light, I'll mix it with the warm colors. And if I'm mixing something that's in shadow, I'll mix it with the cool versions of the color. Because I feel like that really helps with the bringing a sense of light into the painting.
Yeah. Is that something that you learned naturally, or was that part of an education? Because I've learned that from someone else, that to have split primaries gives real depth to the painting. So I was actually gifted that knowledge as opposed to learning in the field. How did you find that out?
Yeah, I did not learn it in the field. I learned it from, I took a workshop with Tim Horn. Are you familiar with his work?
The name sounds familiar. What conjure the work?
Yeah, his work is incredible. And if you can take one of his workshops, he's really good at them. Some artists are not good teachers. Me, I'm not a good teacher either. But he is a really good teacher.
Yeah.
So I recommend courses. But yes, he taught about have a warm color and a cool color of each of your primary colors. And I found that really effective. And that was years ago that I took that class, and I've still used that.
Yeah, that's great knowledge. It's always really nice to have someone share certain aspects of how to approach painting that way, because it can't all be gained in the field. You just kind of get yourself into a certain pattern that's a comfort zone. So it's nice to have that expanded by other people's assistance sometimes, isn't it? One thing I was going to ask as well is, when did gouache come along? When did you start using that? Was that during the time when you couldn't paint with oils, or when did that happen?
Gouache happened because it was when my second born he would nap in the afternoon. And I was like, you know what? I was cleaning out my art supplies, and I found all of these gouaches from college. So they were like really, really old. And I was like, why do I even have all these? Because I think we bought a whole set, and I think we used them for one project freshman year to like make a poster design, right? For like, because that's what gouache for. And I was like, I should try to use these. And so I set up on my bed while he was like napping in his crib and just try to do a painting. And I found that I just really like them. Like I've tried other mediums before, like watercolor. I keep trying to like acrylic again, and I just don't like them. But gouache was different, because gouache is enough like oil that it was like, okay, I can work with this. And still, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing with gouache a lot of the time, most of the time, but it makes it really fun because I can be more like experimental with it because I doing it.
Yeah. Well, did you say it's alla prima, your approach with oil? Is that what you do with gouache as well? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gouache dries, instantly. So it's like, kind of have to be, I don't know. I feel like I can paint much quicker with gouache, which is why it was great for like those nap time I only have like 40 minutes, but I can do this gouache painting sitting on my bed.
Yeah.
Painting from a photo on my phone. It was just really helpful in that time. And now I go back to it when I'm feeling stuck or uninspired with oils. I'll switch over to gouache for like a week or two. And it just like, it helps like get me unstuck.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a really interesting medium. And my co-host Richard, who's normally with us, he's very busy at the moment. Sadly, he couldn't make it. But that's the two mediums he uses as well, is oil and gouache separately, obviously. But yeah, so it's they definitely relate closely in certain ways, which is really nice. Very interesting. A bit of a kind of, I don't know, a bit about a left field question that I wanted to ask is that, do you have anything which you think if early on, if you knew this as an artist, it would have really helped you along the way? Because there are so many things which you learn along the way as kind of epiphanies in the kind of journey of getting better as an artist. Is there any one thing that you can kind of gift to the audience that you'd say, if you don't know this already, this would be really helpful?
Yeah. There's two things. Like if I could go back in time to myself as a college student, I would be like, take some business classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, would have been helpful. Take a business class, take a web design class. But other than that, I say I'm a bad teacher, but I do teach pretty often, not in the past year because baby jail, but before that I was getting into teaching more and more. And the thing that I keep coming across is people that want to start painting, but they feel like they need all of the information first. And I get that. They want to read all of the books, they want to buy all of the supplies. And then they do one painting and then they're like, well, this isn't working for me. I must need to buy more things, or I need to buy more classes, or I need to buy. And the answer is no, just take what you have already and just sit down and just do the painting. Just do the painting. And then if that one's not working, do another one, and then do another one and another one and another one.
Yeah.
Because you're not worse. You're only going to get better. And probably all the questions that you have, not all the questions, probably a good number of questions that you have doing that first painting, you will probably find the answer to yourself once you start painting more.
That's fantastic. That's great insights. Yeah, I love that. Thank you very much. And well, where is it that you exhibit as well? Do you exhibit in a lot of galleries, or what are the places where you do exhibit?
I exhibit in a couple of galleries in town. I don't know that I have work there at the moment. Waterhouse Gallery, I think, has a couple of my paintings. I do. I have like a little co-op gallery, me and now four other artists in Carpinteria on like Linden Little Main Drag. And I really like that as opposed to a formal gallery. It's just so it's the four of us. And so we get to decide, what works we put in there, when we take them out. We don't have to give a cut to someone else. And we all work together. And I think that it's a really like lovely space.
Yeah.
So a lot of my work is there. And then I sell most of my work online on my website. So
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing, is that if people wanted to go and support you and see your work, those galleries, I'll put links to those in the description of this video. And then online, how many different places do you have where you sell work online? Do you have lots, or?
It's on my website. So it's just sharonschock.com is where I sell my originals and prints. I have my prints listed on Etsy, but I don't really prefer selling there. It's just that I've had a shop there forever, so I put my prints there. But yeah, they're all available on my website. if I'm having an auction, sometimes I like to auction off pieces. Then that will be on dailypaintworks.com. But yeah, as of right now, all of my available paintings are available on my website, even the ones that you can view in person at the Linden Gallery. They're still available on my website to view and or purchase.
That's great. Okay, well, we'll definitely have links for that as well. And I'll be putting up images whilst we're talking of what we're talking about. Should we direct people to your Instagram? Because obviously that's where you're really prolific. You post beautiful work there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best way to probably see like the newest pieces. I update that more frequently than I do. I update my website about like once a month, but they're on Etsy. I mean, Instagram.
I'll cut that out.
Daily.
We've given Etsy enough sales.
Yeah. No, my gosh. It's ridiculous.
So yeah, okay. So Instagram's a great place to see it. I mean, I'll obviously put that up because that's where I found you, and it's just lovely to see all your work. It's an amazing body of work, and but yeah, it's just been a real pleasure talking to you. So I appreciate you being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Unfortunately, due to some technical issues, this episode's been cut a little bit short. We normally like to have episodes run to almost an hour long, so this one's probably the shortest one we've made. But you probably noticed there was some delays between me asking a question and her answering, and the signal was breaking up a little bit. It's a real shame because she was a great guest. She was lovely to talk to. I know Richard would love to talk to her as well, so hopefully we'll have her back on as a part 2. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you in the next one. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.